All right, so what do you think needs to be done to reduce taxi violence in the country? We'll speak to various organizations. We're joined by the Cape Organization for the Democratic Taxi Association spokesperson, Diale-Tlabela, who joins us, of course, from the Western Cape. National Taxi Alliance spokesperson, Mr. Theo Malele, is with us as well. We have Santako Gauteng chairperson, Mr. Midday Mali, also with us. And in Gauteng, the Witwatersrand African Taxi Association spokesperson, or WATA. The spokesperson, of course, is Mr. Hamilton Mia, who joins us on the line. Gentlemen, good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. This is certainly a critical industry, not just to the flow of our economy, but also for the everyday South Africans that just want to be able to put food on the table. This is an industry that gets them there. So it's important for us to really look at the issues that some of the industry does have. I want to start at national level, though, if you'll allow me, and I'll start with you, Mr. Malele. With the National Taxi Alliance, you hear the MEC there for transport in Gauteng saying a few things. Perhaps let's start with just the one where she says the department is thinking about shutting down taxi ranks for 6 months so that there is a slowing down of taxi violence. Is that even an option that you think can practically be feasible and plausible?
Well, good evening to you. Good evening to the viewers out there. I think the MEC has actually tried to apply her mind in trying to come up with a solution to address this impasse. But, you know, she could actually go a little bit further more to also ensure that the very lifestyle audit that she's alluding to should be extended to law enforcement agencies that actually work with, you know, issues that relate to conflicts within the taxi industry and also, you know, some of the registration of the routes within the taxi industry. And we welcome that, although I must mention that it may not necessarily be the panacea, because even previously her predecessors had actually meted out similar measures in an attempt of trying to, you know, bring down hostilities within, you know, the conflicting parties. But this seems not to be enough. Perhaps we should also be, you know, be honest with the actual underlying you know, factors that cause this, you know, violence, especially in this said, you know, two parties. To really look into it with a microscope and come up with solutions after having realized all the issues pertaining to this impasse that, you know, has actually seen so many people lose their lives. Yes, we welcome this measurement, but we are saying more still needs to be done in order that there is a lasting solution to this issue. Yeah,
I'm going to come back to you a little later because I want to hear what you would put forward then, Mr. Malele, as what you call the underlying factors behind some of the violence that we see. But let's give a platform to some of our other speakers. Mr. Mali, who's, of course, Santako Gauteng chairman. Thank you for joining us once again. The MEC saying we're thinking about 6 months of shutting down taxi ranks. What do you hear? When you say that, is it something that's possible? And who does it mostly impact if this were to be executed?
Thank you very much, and good evening to the viewers at home. I think we heard the MEC what she said. I think as an industry, we don't have the powers to say she can't implement what is in the law or in terms of the National Land Transport Act, but it is going to impact our commuters, firstly. Secondly, it is going to impact on the innocent taxi operators. Also is going to impact on the employees that are employed by the taxi industry. It means different families are going to be affected negatively, but also about the impact that is going to affect the industry here in Gauteng. Also, it is going to affect the economy. of our province as well by closing down the routes. But most importantly is that what we want to see happening in the province of Gauteng, the operators, taxi operators, should operate with peace, should operate with protection from government, and also the MEC should also have a thorough investigation in terms of the law enforcement agencies that are dealing with the issues of the conflicts on the ground. That is most important. And also the government should be in a position, when the government has taken a decision, be in a position to defend their decision, even in the court of law.
Yeah,
rather than the government come up with a solution. At the end of the day, there is no implementation plan, there is no protection plan, there is no law enforcement authorities to protect the innocent operators that were operating on the routes.
Okay, because you raised the issue now of the role of law enforcement, and you want a deeper investigation into that. And this is something that's been raised quite a bit by Kodeta. But let's quickly speak to Wata, though. We are, of course, joined by Hamilton Mia, who is the spokesperson for the Witwatersrand Taxi Association, Wata. Now, Mr. Mia, you, at the beginning of this week, saw 3 of your members gunned down in Mufulo, in Soweto, a shock to the community of Mufulo. I'm keen to hear from you, just as you think about the ongoing violence that we have seen over the years between Wata and Nandue. If authorities, and I'm talking now about government, is coming in to really help you deal with this impasse over routes, where you've got the MEC saying we need lifestyle audits and shutting down of taxi ranks, it's not really getting to what Mr. Malele has called the underlying factors behind the violence. So how do we get there, Mr. Mayor?
Oh, yes, good evening to you and yes. But true that we've got a problem with the conflict. And the person who did this is the government itself. I think the government must try to investigate for this department, because Nandua is an association and what I get association, they have never fight before until 2015. What makes them to fight now? Because government gives the water the same route and then Nandua same route. Then two conflict comes for. Then she can't solve this because she can solve the rent actually because the law actually she can do that. She has power to do that. But it will be for the third time. And when they close the rent, they don't do nothing. They don't solve the problem. They open the rent without solving anything. The only thing they must solve the problem for us once and for all.
Okay. Yeah, I'm struggling with your line. We're going to try and get you a clearer line, but I got the gist of what you've said. And this is what we heard from Mr. Mia, just for the benefit of our guests and our viewers. Government needs to look in-house, and that's where the investment needs to start, according to Mr. Hamilton Mia, who says that where Wata and Nandue are concerned, he says, government gives the same routes to Wata as it does to Nandue. So almost fueling that very conflict. And we're going to come back to that with our other speakers, but let's hear also the issues that are being raised from other parts of the country, because you've got a frustrated taxi industry, not just in Gauteng, but certainly in the Western Cape as well. You've got, of course, Mr. Tumana, who is the Public Relations Officer for the Cape Organization for the Democratic Taxi Association. You have many challenges, particularly around your relationship with law enforcement. How would you characterize that and the ongoing tension between Kata and Kodeta in Cape Town?
Good evening to you and the viewers and brothers who are present here today, tonight. Yes, we do have a challenge in our province, particularly the two organizations, Kata and Kodeta. But because of we have got a plan in place to discuss our problems, the killings among these organizations are not that much because of the stage where we always, if ever there is any problem from Kata, we always getting a way to resolve our problem. Yes, there are a lot of challenges, particularly in terms of the routes. Sometimes the new routes are creating a lot of problem in the industry. It would be very imperative if our fellow brothers can stick on their routes that were operating for a very long time, not for their new routes, because all these challenges are coming up when someone is opening a new routes. The new routes are creating a lot of killing, and people are killing each other because of those new routes. Thank you.
Yeah, how do you characterize, I'm going to stay with you, Mr. Dumana, how would you characterize then the relationship with law enforcement? Because I know that you've got, for instance, J.P. Smith in the Cape Town area, who's the MMC for Safety and Security, saying that they've had a serious focus on law enforcement, keeping a close eye on what the taxi industry does. Now, how does that impact how the taxi industry operates? And fueling tensions between yourselves and authorities?
I don't think it's the right way if ever members of the association can have a tension between the law enforcement agencies. We need to work very close with them, because those are the people who have the power. These are the people who are able to assist us if during the difficult times, we're depending on to JP Smith. But if ever the JP Smith cannot targeting the taxi industry or alone in our roads and execute his work as he was expected to do so. So currently, yes, the challenges because of the impoundment in Cape Town, heavy traffic fines, those are the challenges that we have. But because of we created a minibus taxi task team, that's where we are dealing these challenges. Slowly but surely we are going there. Yes, the relationship between us is not yet in a good position because of we are crying to the deaf ears. But eventually we hope that things will be much better, as much as if ever we're continuing and engaging, using that platform of minibus task team effectively, not only against the taxi industry. We must also benefit from that engagement. Not only JP Smith always getting benefit there.
Yeah. You've got licenses that are at stake, as you have authorities saying that in Gauteng, over 50 people have died in taxi violence since the beginning of this year. And so the transport industry in the province saying licenses are going to be at stake. How is that going to impact the industry? And then when we come back from the short break, we need to start talking about where are the dispute resolution mechanisms within the taxi industry? Because certainly without those, and if disputes are handled with violence, you have community members, children, as we saw on Monday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, children making their way to school, for instance, and running into a gun violence in their communities. What do we do about that? We're taking your WhatsApps on 072-110-5584, or give us a call on 010-594-6010. We're in conversation with the taxi industry. We'll continue after this. Welcome back. We continue looking at some of the issues that are being raised by the taxi industry, not just in Gauteng, but also in other parts of the country. For instance, we are also joined by the spokesperson, the public relations officer for Codeta, which is also in Cape Town. But essentially what we're getting down to here is, how do we deal with taxi violence in our communities? What dispute resolution mechanisms need to be set up? What is the role of authorities? Are they failing communities? Because where we see this violence, it impacts commuters and community members that see it all happening. And as we continue that, let's talk about what dispute resolution mechanisms are in place, Mr. Malele, where they're failing, who needs to step up so that there is a platform for taxi associations to discuss some of their tensions, come to an agreement that doesn't leak into blood on our streets. Mr. Malele?
Yes, Naledi. You know, I think it's well and good that we ask all these questions. But I think, you know, the fundamental issues are that, first, the playing fields are not leveled within the public transport space. The taxi industry is still being treated as a stepchild of the public transport system. So you see, much as it is a public transport, it is a majority public transport mover, but it does not enjoy any benefits whatsoever. And you'll appreciate that With that comes a lot of pressure as, the variable cost, input cost that actually squeeze the margin, and you have had, the likes of e-hailings that were illegal operations that have been encroaching in the market share for the past 15 years. We need to talk about these things because they have had an impact on this, because they actually border on, squeezing, the very marginal revenue streams that the tax industry should at least be enjoying in order to be able to can meet its, monthly financial obligation. Now, once people are unable to can generate the necessary revenue to sustain their businesses and keep their livelihoods on board, that in itself is a recipe for disaster. We do have, conflict resolution mechanisms within the tax industry, but that is not enough if you still have, government officials who would fraudulently register routes, and some of the routes would be registered over weekends, and even the processing of application of operating licenses also takes forever. And finally, we also have a problem of an oversaturation of routes. And I think at some point, government knowing very well the kind of historical background that we come from, it should have taken the initiative of maybe coming up with some training interventions to teach people on the supply and demand mechanisms. Try and bring people up to a level of understanding the business dynamics. Yes, we've been able to can sustain ourselves amidst all the challenges through and throughout. But at some point, we need some form of, capacitation. So, once we are all capacitated, we will then begin to appreciate that the rules of engagement demand, are such that you can disagree in order to agree until you reach, consensus. Disagreeing does not necessarily mean that you are condescending or you belittling somebody. It basically means that you may not be thinking along the same line. So all you have to do is to try and bring the other parties to understand. We've been in this industry, we know these shortcomings, and I really, really, really urge the political stewardship to step in and assist, that we finally can capacitate people and impress upon people the importance of the taxi industry being a gun-free zone, and also be able to can ensure that we secure this business and we make this business professional for it to grow. As it were, there are no signs, clear signs as to what are the government's intention, when it comes to, for example, are we going to corporatize the tax industry? If so, how do we intend doing so? Are we going to professionalize this industry? If so, how do we intend doing that? So it's just been buzzwords, from time to time. So I think it's about time that we really take a close look at all these challenges and then narrow them down into a program of action in order to be able to can achieve, the bigger objective, and being able to can also resolve issues using dialogue. Yes, dialogue is the way forward, because violence can only beget violence.
I'm highlighting the point that you made, Mr. Malele, about how we get to the industry being a gun-free zone. Because I think that needs to be prioritized over everything else for the sake of commuters, for the sake of the public. Mr. Mali, how do we get there? And whose responsibility is it to ensure that we take the guns out of the industry? Perhaps the right question is even to ask, how do they find themselves in there in the first place?
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mali, that's for Mr. Mali, yes. Mr. Mali, yes.
Thank you very much, Naledi, about that question. You will find out the taxi operators they get the securities for themselves in the reason of being fear for their lives. Because we feel that in our province or in the country, as the citizens, we are no longer safe, we are no longer protected, and we used to know that in any situation that there has to happen within the communities, there should be intelligence that pick up even before the conflicts or the killings are happening within the society or within the tax industry. So some of the people within the industry, they feel threatened. As a result, they arrange their own protection in terms of their securities that they hire to protect their lives as well. But most importantly, what we are facing, seeing the guns being all over the show, is that our law does not deal with the issues accordingly and address the issues in a way that people should feel safe when they enter spaces. I can tell you simple things. Each and everyone currently at the moment, nobody's safe once you are inside your house. You are not feeling safe. What about when you are at the street? What about you are at the environment that we are operating in? Secondly, mostly, some of the people, they look for the securities in a reason of being, you found out that some of the conflicts are perpetuated by the department officials of transport, secondly, by the law enforcement authorities. So therefore, we feel not being safe. Before we can maybe say, let's make our area a free gun zone, let all the unlicensed firearms be removed by our government in the society. Because I do have a belief of licenses that are killing our people are not the firearms that are licensed. If they are licensed, if they get the cartridges, why they are not in a position to trace and find out that who is the real owner of the firearm was used at the crime scene?
Yeah, Mr. Mali, let me step in there, and I want to stay with you for this, because you're saying government needs to find out where the guns in the industry come from. But as alliances and as associations, where we know that there are unlicensed firearms making rounds in the industry, surely there is a role to be played as citizens of the country to say, we know where the supply of weapons is coming from in the industry. So what is the role of, say, Santaco in dealing with that issue, and not just government?
The role of Santaco, we are saying, let the government protect the operators, let the government protect our routes, let the government make sure that the environment we are working under is very conducive. Because it is very much important to say, you will never know the people who are coming with their guns. You will only see a gun when it's killing somebody. And at that time, there's absolutely nothing we can do.
Yeah.
But Santaco always emphasized to say, in any conflict or in any misunderstanding or a dispute, we should sit around the table and make sure that we address the issues that are affecting our business negatively, or issues that can create a conflict between the members.
Yeah, let me hear from Mr. Mia of Wata. Again, this Monday, with 3 of your members being shot in Soweto. Now, I need to, as we talk about guns here, you've got, for instance, the SAPS spokesperson, Colonel Nokolo Kweza, saying that on that scene in Mufulo in Soweto, they found high-caliber cartridges. So these are, you know, this is very heavy machinery that is being used here, that it's finding its way into the industry. So perhaps you can talk to me about what you make of the supply of guns to the industry, but I'm more interested in hearing this from you, Mr. Mia. Now that you've lost 3 of your members, is there conversation within Wata to say, what is the response going to be? So is there a retaliatory plan that is in place?
Oh, thank you. We don't have any plan to retaliate, because that job belongs to the police. The police, they must investigate and get the perpetrators. Then, I'm not surprised when the MEC says the hearing and buses, because their aim was to vanish tax industry. When they introduced BRT, they said tax industry died naturally. Unfortunately, taxi industry didn't die nationally. Then they tried to do this, all this, so that taxi industry can be played because of them. When he spoke about the life audit side of the taxi owners, she must start in her department to make a life audit side of her workers before they come out. She must check that before. Then we are not surprised, but Awata is not prepared to retaliate because we don't know whom we are going to retaliate. Because in actually, what and Nandwa, they are not fighting. The person who makes like we are fighting is government. Because Nandwa got the same permit and we got the permit. But we are not fighting. We are very old association in Soweto.
It's interesting because this is what we're hearing from so many of our speakers this evening, that a lot of the causes of the tensions within the taxi industry, they lay the blame at the feet of government. Tell us what you think. Give us a call at 010-594-6010. Send us a WhatsApp on 072-110-5584. You've got an incident that has just played out in the Western Cape as well. Police investigating the deadly shooting that left a man dead and 3 others killed on Tuesday this week. This is in the Western Cape. Kodeta having spoken out about that as well, saying that they're concerned for the safety of civilians that may be caught in the crossfire when there is tension between various taxi associations. When we come back, we're going to speak to Kodeta, certainly, and hear their point of view, and our other speakers to say what are the recommendations that we put forward, and what do we as commuters and as community members take from this discussion on the other side of the stay with us. Welcome back. We're in conversation with the taxi industry and we're asking how is it that we can curb taxi violence in our communities. Taking your calls on 010-594-6010. Clement is calling in from Mamelodi. Clement, good evening.
Hello, how are you, ma'am?
I'm well, sir. Thank you so much for calling. Talk to us.
Okay, ma'am. Yes, I said, ma'am, the problem regarding the taxi drivers is that they think they are owning the road because they've got the backup and there are too many on the street. So if maybe I clash with one of the taxi drivers, some of the taxi drivers just stop and entering that document without not knowing what happened first. That's the support is the colleague. That's why so at the end there is a killing of the taxi violence like that. But if maybe they must think, knowing that all of us who are using the roads, we are paying for that road, they must understand each other and be patient on the road. It can't be like things like that. Only problem of that. And the problem started in the morning, rushing hour and afternoon. During the day, they don't have any problem.
Yeah, it's the rush hours that are problematic. Yeah.
Exactly. The problem is during rushing hour, in the morning and afternoon.
All right, Clement, thank you so much. And that's, of course, and that's where the supply and demand issue comes in, right? When you've got that rush hour traffic and the taxis, then, the various organizations arguing for, well, this is our rush hour and our route. Let's take some WhatsApps. 072-110-5584. El Twala in Olifantsfontein says, hi, Naledi, please ask the taxi association, why do their members harass motorists by stopping them and forcing people to use taxis? People should be left to choose their mode of transport. Twala, thank you so much for that. Another one that says, my name is Cox. I think the best way is for the government to take charge of any taxi operational duties. And if ever taxi operators fail to adhere to rules and regulations, then permits should be cancelled. And people are even forced to use moving coffins because they are a law unto themselves. Regulate the taxi industry and let them adhere to their permit rules. The permit routes other than taxi associations disband all taxi associations because they don't allow any players in the industry, limit their powers. That's all. Graham is calling in from Johannesburg. Graham, good evening. Graham, good evening.
Good evening to you, ma'am.
Yes, thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm concerned because we are experiencing whereby routes are being disputed. And then a court order is being given out by a judge and a verdict has come out. But this implementation is not being done. The court does its work, the Department of Transport does its work, but law enforcement is failing us. It's failing everybody, the MEC, the Department of Transport, everybody. Hence, that is when the violence is coming in. And we are sitting with a situation where we're sitting today. It's not the first time that this is happening. It is happening continuously.
Yeah, a concerning situation. Graham, thank you so much for calling in. Let's take a look at a few more WhatsApps that have come in from our viewers. Sanjay Lachman from the FBI Foundation says, hi, unfortunately, it's a big lie. The taxi rank will not shut down for 6 months. Everybody's too afraid for the taxi bosses. Operation will run as normal. Sanjay, we appreciate your views. Antina says, the taxi industry thinks and acts as if it's a law unto itself. There are too many politicians involved in the taxi industry, therefore they will be protected and they know it. Therefore, the unruly behavior, the law must come down hard on them. Thank you so much for that WhatsApp. All right, I need to move towards getting closing thoughts here, but Mr. Tumana, perhaps you can talk to me about your understanding of what took place on Tuesday in Kirstenhof. And just as we close off, recommendations, you know, what it is that the taxi industry in the Western Cape, certainly in Cape Town, needs so that we don't have incidents where a man is gunned down and then there's this constant fear of passengers caught in the crossfire.
Thank you once again. I think everyone now in the Western Cape area is living in fear. The taxi owners as well, and
yes, go ahead.
Okay, the taxi owners as well are also living in power. The commuters are also living in fear, you know, because there is a lot of things that is happening in the industry currently, and the intervention of our government is required mostly because people are dying. Some of are innocent, particularly our commuters in our taxis. You know, the law enforcement agencies must do everything in their power to save this kind of incident.
Yeah.
You know, here in Cape Town, there is also the issue of the gangsters, whereby you might see that even our government or law enforcement agencies is getting difficult to control the gangsters, whereby our most people are getting killed by these guys. You know, the issue of the extortion is also affecting our industry. That is why we always require that our government must intervene to ensure that the safety and security is there to save many lives.
Okay.
If you can see the issue that happened in court, in Wanpe court on Tuesday, is one of the things that we never expect that can be happen. Someone can be killed right inside of the court. You know, these are the incidents that are affecting us in the industry, and we always blaming our government some of the issues. You know, whereby government was supposed to do 1, 2, 3, but unfortunately they failed to protect that particular person.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Tumana. We've appreciated your time. Mr. Malele, closing thoughts, and I think perhaps you can talk to us about a recommendation on the way forward on how we deal with the issue of violence, particularly. You talked about getting the guns out. What needs to be done? What is your recommendation?
Well, I'll strongly recommend that we remove cash from being easily available. This will help in many ways. Firstly, it will help with the law enforcement agencies that stops taxis at ungodly hours. So they will know that there is no cash in these minibus taxis, and therefore they will not be stopping those vehicles. Secondly, the behavior of drivers would also change drastically because they are also, after a fast one, we know research has proven that over 40% of our revenue ends up with them. So, and the bucket issue that the MEC spoke about would also be eradicated. So if we can have an integrated public transport system where all public transport players work in unison and using an integrated ticketing system where there is where the system is cashless, we will have solved most of the problems that we are currently facing.
All right, Mr. Malele, they're asking for a tech-savvy taxi industry. Mr. Mali, recommendations in about a minute?
Thank you very much. My recommendation would be the Department of Transport must investigate thoroughly all the routes that are allocated into the associations that having route conflicts. Secondly, the Department of Transport in Gauteng must have its own law enforcement that will deal decisively with the conflicts and the killings within the taxi industry. Also, most important, if our government wants to eradicate killings or the route infringement, we must have a color coding per route in the province, per association, so that each and every vehicle that gets into the other association routes, it should be quickly detected by the law enforcement agencies. Most importantly, again, I would want the government to subsidize the taxi industry so that taxi industry will work under schedule transporting service. Once we can be subsidized and be scheduled, we will understand at what time, which taxi, where is it, how is it operating, is it compliant to be on those routes. As much as taxi industry has been disadvantaged for many years, even before, during this era we are living in. So therefore, also the arms of government must work together. If the Department of Transport works together with the NPA in terms of resolving issues, they must support one another.
Yeah.
Some of the conflicts that are in the province are caused because some of the people, they just go to court after being given a verdict, whereas the judge come with its own verdict again on top of a verdict. And also all the court orders that are there should be implemented if they are duly, rightfully so.
Okay. All right, gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much. And I think an important conversation, one that impacts so many of our most vulnerable people in our communities. So we do appreciate the time of Mr. Hamilton Mia, who's been speaking to us on the phone, spokesperson for the Witwatersrand Taxi Association, or WATA, Mr. Midday Mali, who is Santaco's Gauteng chairperson, Mr. Theo Malele, who is the National Taxi Alliance spokesperson, and Mr. Makosandile Tumana, who is the Public Relations Officer for Codeta in Cape Town. You're still watching Newsfeed PM, the late edition. More news on the other side of this.